This time on Shift Points, we test out our Posi Traction unit here on the red 55 truck. Thank you guys for joining. We started this project. Alright everyone. Alright guys, I told you last week that I was planning on the rear end installation in this truck to be 2 episodes, but it's ended up being 3. We took some time last week and did the setup work on the center section, got it ready and bolted up into the truck. And the other thing that we wanted to do and talk about was the axle bearings on this thing. So if you guys would go back and watch, and I'll tag it in right here, the very end of the video where we finished up the intake, the cold air intake for this truck, you will hear a noise at the end of it, kind of in the background while I'm talking. It's like a roar, kind of this noise, and that noise would happen occasionally in this truck. We thought it was just a drivetrain thing, just kind of there's just a little shake somewhere in there, and that very well may still be the case. But when we pulled the bearings out of this thing, we found some stuff that's kind of a little weird, and we didn't really know the answer, and so we have investigated a little further, and that's the other reason why I wanted to do a part 3. I wanted to talk about these tapered axle bearings that are in this thing and kind of what we've seen, and we're going to see if what we're going to do is fix it. Alright, so we've got one of the axles here up in the vise, and you can see what we've got here. If you have ever put on an axle bearing, a normal, quote, normal regular axle bearing is just a one-piece deal, and it kind of just looks like this assembly right here whenever you put it together, if you ignore this seal. Usually the axle bearing would press onto the axle, and then you'd have a seal that went in and got pressed in, got hammered in place. But these are tapered bearings, and the benefit of a tapered bearing is, and it's something that was started a long time ago actually, if you go back and look at it, but the benefit of a tapered bearing is it will handle side loads a lot better than just your regular traditional flat bearing or cylindrical bearing. Yeah, cylindrical bearing. So if you go into a corner, it handles the load on the axle a lot better than just your traditional bearing. But I want Dad to talk to you guys about kind of what we have found, and you'll see that this kind of appears to be in multiple pieces, and it seems to be not how it's supposed to be.
What we're trying to figure out here, Jake was talking about these tapered bearings, and they do, just like he said, they handle a side load much better. And this is pretty much the same situation as like the front spindle has got opposing tapered bearings, and you set the preload on those tapered bearings by loading each one against itself inside the hub. Well, this is similar, but you're loading this against the axle housing. And the instructions for this, they call these a set 20 bearing from Timken. And I'm, to be fair with you, I'm unfamiliar with these. These are the first ones that I have tried to set up or do anything with. And I put these particular bearings here are the ones that was in the truck that I set up originally and put the disc brakes on. The disc brake kit instructions and the Timken instructions says that you need this spacer, which simulates the thickness of a backing plate. When you put this in on the axle housing, if you have this in the axle, this is on the axle housing, and then this bearing retainer actually goes over the seal, which kind of, I've still not got it in my mind yet how it works. We've done a little bit of stuff off camera back there to make this bearing retainer, instead of loading against the outside race on a standard roller bearing, this actually loads this to here. And it actually loads, this bearing retainer loads against that seal, which is kind of weird to me. But there's little tabs inside this seal that actually pushes against the outside bearing race and loads it against this inside bearing race. This inside bearing race lays against the axle housing, and it squeezes it up just like that. Well, like I say, both the MBM disc brake kit and Timken bearings And we also talked to Strange about this. They say that you want this in here to simulate the thickness of the backing plate, which we don't have with these disc brakes. So this loads like this.
And if you guys remember, if you go back and watch the very first video of this series, you'll see us take note of the order that these come off in. We go and look at it and say, okay, we had the silver spacer, then we had the bearing retainer, and that's the order everything went in. So we were thinking about it even from the very beginning.
And all this spacer, this thickness spacer here that simulates, like I say, the backing plate thickness, does nothing to load these bearings. It goes outside the bearings, has nothing to do with that. All it does is limit the travel in on this bearing retainer. It limits the amount of pressure that goes against that bearing retainer.
And something that we saw in our testing off camera, if you don't have this in there and you do this, you will actually fully bend and warp this retainer plate if you torque these bolts to the 35 foot-pounds you're supposed to.
Which made me feel a little better about loading this seal instead of a bearing race. You can torque this down to 35 foot-pounds, and it, like he said, it'll actually bend the tabs on this and not distort this seal. So this seal is designed to do that, which is kind of weird to me. It's like I say, it's just me, but what we're trying to figure out is if we need, one of the things we're trying to figure out with this whole situation is if we need this particular thickness, which is 1/8 of an inch, to space that bearing retainer out. Will that put enough preload on this to keep the bearings from being unloaded? And then on top of this, you have the caliper mount that has to go on the outside of this, which has nothing to do with bearing preload. You just tighten those nuts down to the same torque specs that Strange gave us to put this in. So, like I say, most of this is caused by my unfamiliarity with this bearing, but at the same time, we took this thing apart. It was put together in accordance with Strange instructions and MBM's instructions. So just trying to get our head wrapped around this whole deal right here. So I'm kind of unfamiliar with it.
The other thing that got us like really curious, if you will, was when we didn't fully understand these, we decided to order a new set of bearings, because these were like $50 a piece or something? $45 a piece for these bearings. But then the real question came in was when these new bearings got here. You can see that this bearing here is one solid piece, but if you look at ours, that race has actually come undone from this. And that's where earlier I mentioned that noise that was in the back. We wonder if this, because it's like this on both sides of the axles, we wonder if this is not our noise that we were hearing. Because if you look at this, if that doesn't do what it's supposed to, this can actually get against the rollers and cause them to bind here on that bearing. So that's where all of this, like, did we not have this loaded enough, or what happened? What caused this to become two different pieces?
And the other thing is, when you put this axle in with the center section in it, which is the only way you can do it, because if you put it in without the center section, there's nothing to support the end of the axle, so it just kind of tilts down into the housing. But when you put this axle assembly in with the splines in the center section, you can't really check to see how much load you have on this bearing, because you've already got a considerable load trying to turn the ring gear and pinion and the boss rack unit all together with this axle. So it's just like I say, just being unfamiliar with it, we're just trying to get our thinking straight when we put this thing back together.
So we tell you guys all about that because to kind of preface what we're going to do, which is we're going to pull these old bearings off, press the new ones on, and then we can reassemble the axles into the axle housing and make sure that we've got those bolts, the axle housing end bolts, make sure we've got them torqued all the way down to that 35 foot-pounds, and make sure that that bearing is well loaded, and hopefully keep this from either coming apart into two pieces, or maybe it come in two pieces. I don't know. We're not sure, to be honest with you. So, but anyway, we're going to take these off, seals, bearings, and everything off, and install the new ones on there. yesterday we spent a lot of time studying and trying to figure out these bearings a little bit. We thought, which I guess we were kind of trying to figure out the bearings, but the biggest thing we were trying to figure out is what caused the bearings that we had in there to become two pieces when the new ones are one piece. And if you go in here and look at the axle, you can actually see there's like a hazy little witness mark here, like something has chattered back and forth on this. Then we got to looking at the lock rings. They call them wedding rings. These get pressed on to the on top of the bearing, so the bearing would go down first, lock ring with it. That bearing seats here, and then the collar, locking collar, wedding ring goes on it like this. So that's how the new ones are going to go on. If you look at the old one and then compare it to the new one, you can see there's a pretty drastic difference between these. I looked online to see if there was anything that maybe there was like a recall or something that happened with these bearings or something that changed. Not that we see anywhere. These are both the same part number and everything, the bearings are. But you can see they're substantially thicker and substantially more diameter to them. And the inner diameter is about the same, maybe just a little tighter on the new one. But makes us think that there's a potential that this locking collar actually slipped some and then let that bearing start to move, chatter back and forth, which would eventually cause the bearing to be in two pieces like you saw earlier, where the bearing and the race have become two pieces where the new ones are a single piece. So after we kind of figured that out, we decided we're going to go with these bearings, we're going to use them. There you go. We're going to go with these bearings, we're going to use them. So we got to take and press these on, and we're going to use our new, of course, the new wedding rings here, and hope that the redesign on the wedding ring has helped to make sure that this doesn't become two pieces again like the old ones are. So that's the plan for today. We'll get these things pressed in, and then we can go ahead and get that thing back together. Alright, so to get these bearings and that wedding ring pressed on, Dad had this old race back here that he's using to support the wedding ring. The wedding ring is pushing against the bearing. That's going to start pressing up here. We do have the seal where it needs to be. We put another race over the strange center emblem, and then we have this big, looks like 3/4 inch material here that we have pressing on that. He's put a good layer of grease on everything, and then that should just press on it. This wedding ring has about a 4/1000 interference fit, which is what the instructions actually call out. So it's going to be tight, but if that's what caused our issue in the first place, I'm glad that it's going to be tight. Oh. Fine.
You ain't got to the hard part.
Oh, the wedding ring ain't got there yet?
The ring is what's going to be the
I thought it had already
pistol.
got probably on it.
Right
There it is. Hit the ring. It's moving. Every time you pump it, it's going down.
Ain't dragging on nothing.
That's doing really well.
I'd say that's it.
So that's it.
Looks like that's it.
It appears to be seated.
Don't tell me how much is on that song.
Yeah. It's a 20-ton press, right? That's what I thought it was. Yeah. Well, if that was the problem, hopefully it shouldn't do it again.
It went better than I
anticipated it to. Yeah, so you can see the bearing is now seated on there very well. I don't think it's going anywhere, so that ain't going nowhere.
That ain't going nowhere. Hey, it rotates.
Hey, that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's kind of its purpose. Cool. One down, one to go. Alright, so we got this first side already wrapped up, at least bolted all together. So we went in and we got some, actually went and got some grade 8 bolts and Dad fixed them into T-bolts. We got some new mechanical lock nuts to lock all this stuff together. So this is all together now. On this side, everything turns. You can see like that. And then if you look at the other side, I don't think you can see it from here. We can do it over there. But you see both of these axles are turning now, which is a good thing because it's got Posi unit in it. So all of this is good. This seems, like I said, this seems happy. So we think we got the seals and bearings how they need to be. We went down to 40 foot-pounds on these bolts here and got those locked down in place. Everything seems good. Just got to put the caliper on it and do the same thing, get the other side into the same place. All right, we got the brake calipers mounted back up. Dad got our emergency brakes back connected, and he is in there getting this thing greased up so we don't forget it. We were adamant about not forgetting it. I think I told you guys last time, but with this, we're gonna run this Lube Guard limited slip supplement. This was up at the Napa store in Marshall. They had it on the shelf. We've also used, I think it's like Trans X. It's a CRC product. We've used that as well. If you guys go back and watch the video where we put the Posi Traction unit in that black 66 Chevrolet truck, we used that Trans X, I think it was Trans X CRC product. That worked really well. They didn't have that this time. We had this stuff. So you mix one bottle for up to 2 quarts, and anything over 2 quarts you need a second bottle. We don't remember the capacity on this thing. It's for sure a quart. So we got one bottle mixed in, or one bottle of the supplement mixed into that. Dad put about half of a bottle into the rear end. We poured the limited slip in it and then shook it up so it mixed up real well. And then he's putting that in right now, and we'll go ahead and get ready for a second bottle. If you guys remember when we were on Power Tour, we had a fuel leak problem with this truck, and we have went over multiple iterations of fixing it, but we realized just the other day that this thing has that leak issue still. It's not a leak actually, it's actually fuel is getting up into the vent somehow, even though the top of the fuel tank is there. And we have our vent over on the other side, but here in this standard, all the way up here. The only thing we can figure is we used the vent that was in the tank that's on the front of the tank. The only thing that we can think is that when we're braking, the fuel's going forward and it's kind of like pressurizing the line and pressing it all the way up into there. So our plan is to drop the tank, get the vent out of this, and put it in the vent hole that was in the fuel pump in the center of the tank, and hopefully finally fix this thing because we don't need no dang fuel leaking out of it when we take it to the drag strip. Alright, so we dropped the tank out of this thing. It's just sitting here on the jack like that. That's got a little sport on it. Right here is where there was a plug. We pulled that plug out and removed the elbow that was over there, the 90 that was over in the corner. Put it in here and attach that hose right there up, and that's going to go up into our vent. We believe that this should help. If not, hopefully it will completely fix our issue here. So the only thing I've got to do, tighten up that hose clamp, and we'll have this ready to go, and we got to plug that hole over there. Don't want to forget that. And we'll go ahead and get the tank pulled back up in place. Got this thing put back together, fixed a few little odds and ends. We're gonna take it for a test drive, see if our noise, our weird noise that happened in the background is fixed, and we'll make sure that this thing's good, get the rear end broke in real good. So that's what the plan of this test drive is for this time. Well, so far so good. We still have a little bit of that noise, so we're back to thinking it's probably something to do with the transmission just a little bit, with everything being kind of hard mounted in. But everything seems to be doing really well. We made a tight turn up in the parking lot up there. It didn't have any chatter or anything, so our additive is working. So everything so far has panned out pretty good. No leaks or anything out of the rear end. So far on this drive, no leaks out of the, no fuel coming up out of the vent. So all around so far, successful first outing in the truck. There's that chicken.
That chicken stays right in there all the time.
Chicken.
Did you film the chicken?
Yeah. Alright guys, we got the truck out here in the driveway. It's time to test and see if our both tires turn over and make sure our Posi Traction is working. All right, go ahead, Eddie. That'll do her. Got both lines here, you can see. I think that'll just work just fine. Kind of a puny burnout, but in general, it's good enough for what we needed to do, which was just to test to make sure that this was going to work how we wanted it to. Something pretty cool if you go and maybe you have to re-watch what you just watched on the underside of the truck as he was doing the burnout. You can see the slapper bars are working. They are loading up on the spring. You can see them hit the spring. This thing spun really straight. Like I said, it was not a massive burnout by any means, but as he took off, the truck really was dead straight. So we're hoping that's going to apply pretty well at the drag strip as well. So this is pretty cool. It's nice that kind of see all of the things that we've done kind of come together here on the truck. The next time you see this truck, it will most likely be at a drag strip of some sort. We'll be trying to take it down, see how fast it goes, see what it looks like, and see how it performs with all the modifications that we've done. So if you guys don't care, hit subscribe, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, do all those things, and make sure, like I said, that you're following along with us, because this thing is going to go to the drag strip at some point, hopefully here in the near future. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.